For a long time, we have imagined a clear separation between the human and the wild, an invisible line between what is safe and what is dangerous. But in some regions of Africa, that boundary does not exist. It never did. The day begins before calm has time to settle. On the savannah, dawn does not bring silence. It brings a contained movement, almost imperceptible. The air is still cool, but the environment is already in a state of alert. There are distant sounds that cannot be clearly identified. They seem far away, but not far enough to be ignored. They are not always visible. Sometimes they are only sensed. On the ground, around some villages, tracks appear where they should not be. Deep, recent marks that were not there the day before. And in these places, that is enough to change the course of the day. Before the sun sets, the cattle begin to grow restless. They no longer respond as they usually do. They stop following routine. They react to something that has not yet happened. Here, the lion is not a symbol or a distant story, but a constant presence that, even when unseen, ends up shaping everyday life. Where people walk, when they rest, and what they are willing to protect or to lose. What does it mean to live when danger does not appear from time to time, but is part of every decision? Welcome to PlanetTribes. Throughout this documentary, we will travel across territories where 6 African peoples have learned to coexist with one of the most dangerous predators on the continent. Each one faces it in a different way, with strategies, routines, and decisions that are not taught. They are inherited. Before we move on, if you are interested in real stories, documented and told with respect, this is your place. Because only by reaching the end will you understand what happens when danger is not avoided. And to understand how this coexistence is built, we must begin with those who tried to set limits on the lion using the only thing they had: their own land. Tribe 1, Maasai, setting limits on a predator. On the open plains of southern Kenya and northern Tanzania, the lion does not live far from people. It lives at the same distance as the cattle. Here, that separation does not hold on the ground. There is no continuous boundary marking where one world ends and the other begins. Only an open, exposed territory. Humans and predators read the same signals: the wind, distant sounds, the almost imperceptible movements of the savannah. During the day, the lion's presence is barely perceived. It rests in the shade, hides in the vegetation, observes without being seen. But when the light begins to fade and the air cools, the balance shifts. That is when the cattle become the most fragile point in the landscape. Animals clustered together, predictable, unable to react quickly to an attack. That is why, for the Maasai, the most delicate moment of the day is not dawn, but dusk. Before night fully falls, the village comes to life. Nothing is improvised. The cattle are gathered, grouped, and led into the bomas, circular enclosures built from thorny acacia branches. They are not symbolic structures or tradition turned into habit. They are a direct response to a predator that knows the land as well as those who inhabit it. Each thorn serves a specific purpose, making the leap harder, slowing the advance, creating hesitation, buying seconds. They do not promise absolute safety. No one believes they do. But they create a minimal boundary that, in these territories, makes the difference. Across various initiatives to reduce conflict, it has been observed that reinforcing enclosures reduces nighttime attacks on livestock. Not thanks to advanced technology or external systems, but to knowledge accumulated over generations: how the predator moves, how it tests before attacking, how it hesitates when it encounters resistance. A simple defense that, when well built, separates a dawn with intact cattle from a loss capable of destabilizing an entire family. When the cattle are inside, another part of the day begins. Sleeping is not disconnecting. Sleeping is listening. The night fills with sounds that are not always identifiable. A dry crack, a movement that does not fit, a silence that lasts longer than usual. Not every night brings an attack, but every night carries the possibility. If a lion manages to enter the enclosure, the loss is not measured only in meat. For the Maasai, cattle mean food, social status, capacity for exchange, and future. They are what sustain a family in the present and project it into tomorrow. Losing them implies imbalance, vulnerability, and in some cases the complete collapse of the family economy. A single incursion can erase years of stability. But the impact does not end when the lion leaves. The attack leaves a trace that is not always visible. In many cases, the loss is accompanied by a silent burden that falls on whoever was responsible that night. Not as an explicit accusation, but as a persistent doubt that settles in and does not dissolve with time. Whether the enclosure was properly closed, whether the place was the right one, whether there was a sign no one knew how to read. The lion does not only leave an absence in the boma, it leaves a fixed memory tied to a specific point in the land, to a sound, to an exact hour of the night. That place is never neutral again. Each time one passes nearby, each time the sun sets at that same point on the horizon, memory returns. Not as immediate fear, but as a constant alertness that seeps into later decisions. Routes change. The way of keeping watch changes. The way the enclosure is closed changes. It is not always said out loud, but it weighs heavily. In communities where protecting livestock is a shared responsibility, failure is internalized, not as collective guilt, but as a personal burden that lasts a long time. While in other places, closing a door is an automatic gesture, here closing an enclosure is a conscious decision, a silent acceptance that if it fails, nothing will be the same the next day. The Maasai do not seek to eliminate the lion. They seek to live alongside it, to set limits without breaking the balance that keeps the territory alive. This coexistence is not recent. For generations, the Maasai have shared territory with the lion without separating from it through walls or artificial borders. Their knowledge of the predator's behavior does not come from modern studies or external manuals, but from observation accumulated and passed down from parents to children. Long before national parks, reserves, or conservation policies existed, they already knew how to read the lion, to recognize when it was about to attack, when it hesitated, and when it was better not to force the encounter. That knowledge made it possible to establish limits, even if they were fragile. But even those limits have a reach, and when they are no longer sufficient, the danger does not disappear. It simply forces a different way of facing it. What happens when you can no longer protect yourself with walls, when the boundary you built stops working and the risk remains there, waiting? The reality is that not all peoples can build barriers against the lion. There are places where it does not stop at walls or enclosures, where defense ceases to be a matter of architecture and comes to depend directly on the human body. Tribe 2, Samburu. Keeping watch so others can sleep. In northern Kenya, Samburu territory offers no clear refuges and no defined boundaries. The savanna stretches for kilometers in every direction, dry, open, exposed. The natural corridors used by lions cut through the same space where human settlements stand. Here, the landscape does not separate, it forces sharing. In such an environment, building physical barriers is not always possible. There are no continuous walls or enclosures capable of containing a predator that moves freely when night falls. Defense, therefore, takes another form. When the sun begins to disappear, the village does not shut down. It reorganizes. Life does not stop. It is redistributed. While one part of the community rests, another remains awake. Night watch is neither improvised nor exceptional. It is part of daily routine. Shifts are established to cover the most delicate hours, those when the lion approaches most easily. The fire remains lit throughout the night. Its light signals presence. Its smoke shows that the territory is not empty. The barrier is not a wall. It is the human body itself. Those who keep watch do not seek to confront the lion or provoke it. The goal is not to dominate, but to deter, to make constant attention visible and eliminate the element of surprise. But that attention comes at a cost. Staying awake for hours in the darkness forces the body to operate at its limits. Fatigue does not arrive all at once. It seeps in. Brief, almost imperceptible lapses appear where perception becomes distorted. A shadow seems to move. A sound is confused with another. The night leaves too many things unconfirmed. Under these conditions, remaining calm requires continuous, exhausting effort. And vigilance does not end when the sun rises. It lingers inside the body. Sleeping little alters judgment and makes every decision the next day more fragile. Herding, moving, protecting the youngest. Everything happens with less margin for error. Nighttime risk does not disappear. It shifts into the day. And not everyone keeps watch in the same way. The responsibility of staying awake is not assigned at random. Age, experience, and position within the group all matter. Not just anyone can take on guard duty and sustain it for hours without failing. When attention slips, the impact is not only individual. It is not always spoken of, but it is fixed in the group's memory. Not as punishment, but as a silent warning. Because when an attack occurs, the damage does not fall on a single family. It disrupts the balance of the entire group. That is why protection is not delegated. It is shared. And it is at that point that the idea of safety begins to blur. What does it mean to feel safe when safety depends on someone else not closing their eyes? Here, a quiet night exists only because others remain awake. In many parts of the world, we take it for granted that someone protects us while we sleep. An invisible system. A safe distance we rarely question. In Samburu territory, that distance does not exist. Protection is not abstract or automatic. It is human, daily, and tangible. And yet, this is not the limit. There are places where there are no shifts, no support, no shared fire. Where loss is not divided, it falls entirely. And moving forward becomes a burden carried in silence. That is where we are heading. So far, everything you have seen are ways to reduce risk. From now on, you will see what happens when reducing it is no longer possible. Tribe 3, Datoga. Surviving without a safety net. In the central regions of Tanzania, the Datoga inhabit open territories where no visible boundaries exist between human space and the space of the predator. The landscape offers no clear refuges and no exclusion zones. Herding takes place in shared areas, where cattle and lions use the same natural paths, the same routes to water, the same narrow passages where visibility decreases and risk increases. Each day begins with an implicit decision to move forward, knowing that danger cannot be eliminated, only managed. The herd moves in search of grass and water, crossing spaces where the environment favors ambush. There are no completely safe routes, only choices that reduce or increase exposure. Every movement is a silent calculation, a constant evaluation between what is necessary and what is risky. In this context, protecting everything is not always possible. When risk increases, decisions arise that have no correct option. Choosing which animals move first, which remain closer to the group, which take on greater exposure. It is not about saving the weakest or the strongest, but about trying to sustain the whole with the resources available. Sometimes, the decision goes beyond daily routines. Selling part of the herd before losing everything becomes a survival strategy. Not as a free choice, but as an anticipated renunciation. Sacrificing the future to secure the present. Reducing the herd today to avoid having nothing tomorrow. Each of these decisions leaves a mark, because what is sold or exposed does not return, and what is lost alters what will be possible later on. When a lion attacks, the impact is immediate and final. There are no stable or guaranteed compensation systems. There is no institutional support to soften the loss. The animal that is killed is not replaced, not recovered, and not forgotten. Here, the attack does not end when the lion moves away. It continues in the days that follow. Losing cattle means reducing available food, weakening social status, and diminishing the ability to face future crises. Each animal lost means less margin for the next drought, the next disease, or the next attack. But the real damage appears over time. A first attack can be endured. A second in the same year is no longer experienced as an accident. It begins to be perceived as a sequence. Attention grows more tense. Decisions are made with urgency. The margin for error narrows. And when the last breeding animal is lost, the blow ceases to be immediate and becomes structural. It is not just a body that is lost. The possibility of recovery disappears. The herd stops growing. The future shortens. For this reason, among the Datoga, loss is not lived as an isolated episode. It is integrated as a constant possibility. Life continues because there is no alternative. Herding goes on, even knowing that danger remains intact. In many parts of the world, losing something is a setback, a mistake that can be corrected, a blow that can be softened with time, insurance, or external support. Here, a loss can shape a family's future for years, not as an exception, but as an ever-present possibility. But there is something that weighs more than material loss, because here, survival is not better. It is survival without an alternative. Subscribe to the channel and keep watching, because what comes next shows what happens when there is no margin left, when risk can no longer be reduced. And now, you will understand why. Tribe 4, Hamar. When the lion attacks what gives life meaning. In the Omo Valley in southern Ethiopia, Hamar life revolves around cattle, not as just another economic activity, but as the axis that organizes existence. It is not only a source of food, it defines wealth, respect, and family continuity. Here, what matters is not accumulated in immobile objects. It walks, moves, and breathes. And as long as it exists, it holds together a network of relationships that sustains daily life. The territory they inhabit is not isolated from wildlife. Lions move through the same areas where cattle graze and where families establish their settlements. They do not appear every day, but their presence is never ruled out. When a lion attacks, the damage is not limited to material loss. It strikes directly at the social structure. Losing cattle means losing prestige, capacity for exchange, and in some cases, a voice within the clan. The impact is not measured by what is lost, but by what can no longer be sustained afterward. Relationships that change, commitments that can no longer be fulfilled, a presence that loses weight without anyone naming it. Anthropological studies and fieldwork in the Omo Valley have documented that this loss affects not only subsistence, but also the social fabric and networks of reciprocity. Authority is not imposed, it is sustained. And when cattle disappear, sustaining it becomes more difficult. Afterward, there are not always reproaches. What remains is silence, a memory tied to a place, to a specific night that is not spoken of, but is not forgotten. For this reason, among the Hamar, protecting cattle is a constant priority. Daily decisions, where to graze, how long to stay, when to return, are made with the goal of avoiding the encounter. It is not always achieved, but every choice seeks to reduce a risk that never completely disappears. Fear does not take the form of flight. It is expressed as sustained tension, the need to keep intact what gives meaning to everyday life. When night falls, risk intensifies. Darkness reduces visibility and favors the predator. Every sound carries weight. Every unexpected movement is assessed quickly. Attention does not relax, because doing so would mean accepting a vulnerability that cannot always be afforded. Nothing ends when the lion leaves. From that moment on, the territory becomes smaller. Loss can break agreements, shift alliances, and change a family's position for years, even decades. It is not an episode that is easily overcome. It is a rupture that reorganizes what will be possible from that point forward. In our world, what matters is often measured in numbers, documents, or property. Here, what sustains a life can disappear in a single night, and with it, the stability built over decades. What is at stake is not only immediate survival, it is the continuity of a way of life, the possibility of continuing to occupy a recognized place. So far you have seen how what is owned is protected, but there are places where risk goes beyond material loss, where the lion does not threaten only what you possess, it threatens directly who you are. Tribe 5, Hadza, accepting vulnerability. In the surroundings of Lake Eyasi in Tanzania, the Hadza live without walls separating the human body from the environment. They do not build enclosures or raise permanent defenses. Their way of life does not contemplate isolating themselves from the land, because doing so would mean breaking the direct relationship they maintain with it. Their camps are temporary, light shelters designed to last only a short time. Nothing is made to remain in the same place for long. Not even the feeling of safety. Here, staying is a provisional decision, not a guarantee. And in this landscape, lions do not occupy a distant or controlled space. They move through the same areas where the Hadza hunt, rest, and travel. They share routes, clearings, paths, and passageways. Coexistence is not based on confrontation, but on the constant reading of the environment. Sleeping does not mean disconnecting. It means trusting an experience accumulated over generations. Nothing places real distance between the human body and the predator. Protection is not found in what is built, but in how signs are read. Fresh tracks, sounds that do not fit, minimal changes in animals. Everything happens in real time. Every night, someone lies down knowing that a single, sign may have been misread, because that evaluation does not always lead to the correct decision. Sometimes the information is incomplete. An old track appears recent. Silence is mistaken for calm. A movement is attributed to the wind. Error is not always immediate. It reveals itself later when the environment responds in an unexpected way. And then learning is not theoretical. It is direct, physical, and leaves a mark that is not forgotten. Hadza knowledge is not transmitted only through words. It is refined through experience, including failure. Each mistake redefines how observation works, which signs are prioritized and which are no longer overlooked. There is no margin to repeat the same mistake many times. That is why attention is not a momentary skill. It is a permanent state. It does not activate only when risk appears. It accompanies every movement, every pause, every moment of rest. Even when everything seems calm, vigilance never fully drops. When risk increases, the camp is not reinforced. No night watches are organized, no attempt is made to resist. A more radical decision is taken: to leave. Movement is the only real protection. Changing location reduces the probability of encounter, even if it does not eliminate it. Staying when balance is broken would mean assuming unnecessary risk. Abandoning a camp means leaving behind food, improvised tools, shelters that required time and effort. And the journey itself exposes vulnerability. Walking through open areas, crossing low visibility spaces, moving forward while fatigue bites into attention. The journey in itself is vulnerability. To move is to begin again, searching for water, locating safe areas, rebuilding the essentials. That is why the decision is not taken lightly. Each relocation consumes energy, time, and margin for error. Even so, when the signal is clear, staying becomes more dangerous than leaving. Among the Hadza, vulnerability is neither hidden nor fought. It is accepted as part of life. There is no illusion of total control, only the ability to adapt quickly and to recognize when the environment is no longer favorable. Here, survival is not about dominating nature, but about knowing when to remain and when to disappear in time. In our world, we have built systems to feel that we dominate the space we inhabit. Walls, rules, distances, and devices that promise constant security. The Hadza have learned something different: to live without that promise, to accept that constant attention is the only possible defense. Up to this point, every response has had a limit, but there is one final territory where that limit disappears. A place where there is no functional separation, no sufficient vigilance, no movement that guarantees protection, where humans and lions coincide again and again in the same places because they share exactly what sustains life. And when that happens, danger is no longer avoided. Tribe 6, Himba. When there is no choice. In northwestern Namibia, in the Kunene region, the landscape breaks with everything seen before. Here, there is no green savanna and no abundance of resources. The territory is arid and unpredictable. The land opens into hard expanses, where water is not a stable element, but an event. And yet, there are lions. This is not an anomaly or an isolated exception. There are documented populations of lions living in the arid and semi-arid regions of northwestern Namibia. They can travel great distances under the sun, hunt with fewer available prey, and survive where water is scarce and contested. That same environment is home to the Himba. Life here is organized around a few critical points: places where water still exists. Wells, seasonal riverbeds, areas where survival is possible for a few more hours. Everything revolves around them. Everything converges toward them. And those points do not distinguish between species. Humans and lions are forced to coincide, not by choice, not by strategy, because there is no alternative. Unlike other territories, there are hardly any safe routes here, and moving does not always reduce risk. Movement does not guarantee protection. Staying does not either. Scarcity reduces the margin of decision until it disappears. Sometimes the encounter does not arrive with roars or chases. It arrives in silence. A group of Himba moves toward a water point after hours of heat. The cattle walk ahead, tired, slow. Dust rises with every step. Upon arrival, the tracks are already there, large, fresh. There is no doubt about who passed first. No one says anything. There is no clear order, no obvious gesture. Only a pause, a tense wait. The cattle stop. Bodies remain still. Every second counts, but moving too quickly can be worse than not moving at all. The lion may be nearby, or it may not be. There is no way to know for certain. Waiting means thirst, exhaustion, delaying the return. Moving forward means assuming immediate risk. There is no correct option, only a silent decision with no margin for error. And sometimes, not even that. When a lion appears near a Himba settlement, there is not always time to react. Distance is short. The environment offers no refuge. The encounter can occur in broad daylight, not only at night. Risk is not constant in frequency, but it is in intensity. Every coincidence at a water point concentrates all variables: need, exhaustion, vulnerability, and immediate survival. Here, coexistence is not organized through walls, shifts, or strategic movement. It is assumed. The relationship between humans and lions is not mediated by an invisible boundary. They share the same map, the same roots, and the same sources of life. In many parts of the world, we believe that progress has definitively separated us from nature, that we built enough distance to feel safe, that we raised physical, social, and mental barriers that placed us out of reach of danger. Here, that never happened. Human life continues to unfold within the same territory as the predator, without filters, without buffers, without real choice. There is no illusion of control, only the acceptance of a shared reality. At this point, there is an idea that can no longer be ignored. It is not that lions are close. It's that, in these places, human life unfolds within the same map as the predator. And when you understand that, safety ceases to be a place and becomes a question. What does it really mean to be safe? As we move through these territories, it becomes clear that we are not comparing cultures, but radically different ways of inhabiting risk. We have seen communities where risk is not an occasional accident, but a constant presence, where security is neither delegated nor automated, where adaptation is not an admirable option, but the only way forward. Before ending, there is something rarely remembered, yet well documented by anthropology and archaeology. For most of human history, living meant sleeping without total guarantees, without a clear separation between rest and threat. For tens of thousands of years, rest was not a state of complete disconnection, but a vigilant pause. Sleeping deeply, without constant vigilance or solid shelters, was not the norm. It was a late exception, linked to sedentary life, stable architecture, and much later, organized security. In evolutionary terms, the feeling of sleeping safely is a recent phenomenon. In our world, by contrast, we have turned comfort into an objective. We reduce danger, isolate it, and push it away from everyday experience. We build systems to feel that everything is under control, and, without realizing it, we confuse that feeling with security. The more we protect ourselves, the less we practice adaptation. And what is not practiced is lost. Not through incapacity, but through disuse. These communities do not live this way by choice or by romanticism. They live this way because they could never afford to forget how to adapt, because they never had the option to fully lower their guard. And that leaves a question that is not easily answered. Does modern security protect us? Or is it also distancing us from what shaped us as a society? If this idea has made you reflect, we invite you to share your point of view. On PlanetTribes, we continue to explore real stories where survival is not a concept, but a condition. If this story made you reflect, perhaps it also deserves to be shared. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next documentaries. And if this journey has accompanied you to the very end, write the keyword of this episode in the comments: adaptation. Because understanding how others survive also says a lot about who we are. Remember, this is not the end. It is just another place where the map is questioned once again. Thank you for joining us on this journey. See you at the next destination.